Hi everyone, it's Josiah. On today's episode, I am talking to Austin Frerick, a fellow Iowan who is an expert on agricultural and antitrust policy. For those of you who have been keeping up with the show the past few months, you'll know that agriculture, food production, and political ecology have been some topics I've been wanting to explore in some more depth. This interest, alongside the theme of extractive industry that we've been exploring on the book club episodes, made Austin here a perfect guest to begin this ongoing thread on the show. Back in 2021, Austin published a piece in Vox called The Hog Barons. You can find the link to this in the show notes. It's a great piece looking at how Jeff Hansen, an Iowa hog farmer, became one of the richest and most powerful business people in the state. This year, Austin published a book called Barons: Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry, where he expands the premise of the original piece and looks at 7 different corporate titans that run the food industry in America, each one representing a specific industry and also representing a systemic problem. There's the Hog Baron, Iowa Select Farms, owned by the aforementioned Jeff Hansen. There's also Cargill, the Grain Baron, Fairlife, the Dairy Baron, Driscoll's, the Berry Baron, JBS Foods, the Slaughter Baron, Walmart, the Grocery Baron, I'm sure you've heard of them, and JAB, the Coffee Baron, which I accidentally called GAB on the episode, so sorry about that. I talked to Austin on a Zoom call while he was in Minneapolis speaking at a conference. We go through each of the barons and look at the way deregulation and neoliberalism produce the corrupt and unsustainable food system we see today. It's a great episode, and I hope you enjoy it. But before we dive into the interview, though, I quickly want to say that you can support this show on Patreon. For $3 per month, you get access to 2 to 3 bonus episodes per month. Recent episodes have included a conversation with Josh Borman from the Worst of All Possible Worlds about the campus protests, and a conversation with Chris Barker about environmental history, and a lot of the same themes that are on today's episode. There's also a new series called The Music Exchange, where frequent collaborator Josh Christensen and I exchange an album that's personally meaningful to us and try to compare and contrast them. There will be a brand new episode of that series coming out later this week. And with all of that out of the way, let's get on to the episode and talk to Austin Frerick. You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast about history, politics, art, philosophy, faith, and the internet, hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. This is episode 34, Food Barons, featuring Austin Frerick, where we talk about corruption in the food industry and the impacts of neoliberalism. Welcome everybody to Fruitless. I am joined today by Austin Frerick. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't really know who you are, what you do, would you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a failed Iowa politician. I just published my first book, Barons, Money, Power, and the Corruption of American Food Industry. I'm 7th generation Iowan, first in my family to go to college, and this is what I love. I love talking about food system stuff.
Yeah, actually, was that 2018? Was that when you ran to be a politician? you mentioned the failed politician thing.
Oh, no. So I ran for state senate, and I lost by 100. Oh. I'll never forget. 143 votes.
Yeah, that was in 2018, right? Was it? Or was it a different...
I looked at running 2018. I never was on the ballot.
Okay.
I ran in a Democratic primary in 2022.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know. I'm a big believer. I don't want to... No one's going to give you a seat at the table. You have to fight for it. That's just kind of like a core belief of mine. And so I can complain online or fight for a seat.
Yeah. So I don't remember the context, but it was in 2018 that I first heard you. I heard you do a talk. And I don't remember where it was at, but it was a Des Moines Democrats meeting of some sort where you're talking about monopolies. And so I've been aware of you're really into antitrust stuff, and that was like a thing you were interested in.
Yeah.
And I've been recently getting more interested in agriculture and food production, and I just happened to go, I wonder what Austin Frerick's been doing in the last few years. And then I was like, oh my God. literally the
It's
perfect.
so funny you say that.
God.
I've been doing the same song and dance for we're going on years now.
Yeah.
I was told I was too lefty, too fringy, and I just got done filming an episode for an hour on Glenn Beck's TV network on this stuff, and they get it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's so funny.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I don't know. I don't think it was that fringe. I mean, I think it's just correctly reading the room right now to say, we are living in kind of another Gilded Age. Just seemed like a.
But also, I mean, my hot take is America works right now for upper class suburbanites, and it's just really hard to convince them to sure, you're bourgeois, a fancy Hy-Vee, things might look good, but there's a really dark undercurrent there. And the thing I really realized, I love going for road trips. That's my thing. I have an old road atlas. Is rural Iowa goes to urban Iowa. Urban Iowa doesn't go to rural Iowa. Everyone in Iowa goes to the fair. They go to Jordan Creek, but Jordan Creek is. I mean, you bypass these towns. I mean, Iowa has so many unnecessary 4-lane highways. That's actually a little pet peeve of mine. Of because here's the thing, but they're not for people. They're for moving commodities.
Yeah, I mean, Des Moines as a city is kind of the intersection of two arteries of the whole country for commodity transfer, 80 and 35. Yeah.
That and even when you start going, I do the drive. I used to do the drive from Cedar Rapids to Madison, Wisconsin all the time. And it's just a 4-lane road the whole time. And it's empty half the time. There's just no reason. And it used to be 2. I remember going through Monticello and all these towns, and now you don't. And it just kills these little towns. And it's just such a waste of money and such a waste of land.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think that's kind of that's definitely an Iowa problem, is maybe waste of land. We have really beautiful land, and we don't seem to use it. We use it instead for.
I was going to say, you don't think we should take the best farmland in the world and burn it in our cars for no reason?
No, I don't think so. Especially, it's not better for the environment. It's not.
That's one of my favorite little. My husband always do the first passive editing on my book. And he calls them gay Iowa sassy lines I have. And because there's a certain Iowa subtlety about your sass. You're not overt about it, and you deliver in such a dry way.
Yes.
But ethanol is the one that just makes me I'm just it's so clearly wrong. And there's this false notion that it's politically popular in Iowa, and you're Ted Cruz won Iowa in 2016 in the caucuses opposing ethanol.
Yeah.
No one no, this is just BS. And anyone that says ethanol is good for the climate in 2024 believes the world is flat.
Right.
There's just no conversation to be had.
Yeah, but it's part of it's how extractive industry has manifested in our state. A few episodes back of the show, I did something. I did an episode on the book Ramp Hollow, which is history of Appalachia. And, it was looking a lot at the way extractive industry worked in there. And I was talking to, one of the friends I had on that was also an Iowan. And we were starting to talk about how there is a sense in which there that same level of extractive industry that you associate with Appalachia has become more and more the case about Iowa, where it's we don't have coal, but we have topsoil. And there is an elaborate, kind of extractive industry it's a giant pit mine of a state now, but it's just agricultural.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I had the same. That's what really shaped me, is Iowa is an extraction colony. And my college thesis was literally, I studied the slaughterhouse towns in Iowa. When I first literally looked at these, because I was interested about the school districts, they're fascinating. They're the most diverse places in Iowa, also the poorest. And it was a conversation I had with a principal in one town where he literally in one sentence told me about here's all these things they have to deal with as a school because all these kids, they're low income kids. They bring all this additional baggage. At the same time, too, he's also praising the slaughterhouse to me, saying, quote, we get all these free hot dogs for back to school.
And it's God.
My professor was Austin, do you not get what's going on there? He can't put those two together. If these students, as the parents made more money, he wouldn't be dealing with all these issues. And my professor actually had me read this book on Appalachia. They call it the third face of power, where someone has so much power over you, they shape your wants and desires. And that is, to me, the story of Iowa now is the conversations in Iowa are shaped by industry.
Yeah. And it to a point that I don't know, it's so ideological, no one notices it. It's just part of the air in Iowa. You don't even notice that that's what we're talking about in a way that I don't know, something about mining and factories. They kind of call back this old labor tradition, and you can kind of think about the politics of it more than like something about agrarianism, something about agriculture, food production. People don't think of it as political or as something where there's extractive industry taking place.
We have all these. I mean, just even to layer on the extractiveness framework, most farmland's owned by non-Iowans. Grandma, grandpa die. The kids move to like Long Beach, California. They put it into a trust. They rent it out. That person who rents land doesn't care for it the same way. They're barely trying to get by. The way the farm bill is designed is you overproduce grain, so the markets are always glutted. The price is always low. So you have to push your land. You have to push the rented land more. I don't know. I mean, they also have massive consolidation of on the meat and dairy side, where like 10 companies control 70% of the hog markets. I mean, that used to literally when we were born, those were family farms, and that just collapsed. I mean, that is like wild. I mean, even dairy cows are the one I noticed too, because so my parents keep a camp up in northeast Iowa, near right outside Wadena, and that's dairy country. It's too hilly really to do row crops. All the dairy cows are gone. They're all in this industrial model.
Yeah. Well, so that actually really nicely leads us into, I wanted to kind of talk about your new book here, Barons, which is, you look at, what is it, 7 different, specifically like 7 different, barons, food barons. You've got, hog barons, grain barons, these large corporate entities, and each of them represent some sort of structural thing to you, right?
Yep.
Okay. There were a couple things I kind of wanted to start with and then move into the specific barons though. And one of those is, I wanted to bring up chicken farming briefly because one of the trends you kind of mentioned throughout all these other barons is the chickenization of different industries. Like that model getting applied to different things. So could you quickly explain like what that chicken model is that got produced in the first place and how is it so dangerous that it's become, it's infected even more markets?
Yeah. So, I mean, let me just start with the premise of,
I
want to be very careful in this book of not romanticizing the past. The food system, the agricultural system in America is rooted in slavery and genocide. There are great things to learn from the past. We have a dark past, and we made progress at reforming that system. The scary thing, and you see it with chicken, is this food system is returning to its really dark exploitive origins. And what's so funny is like chickens, like, you can kind of almost blame it on chicken. Is like a century ago, like when people were so mad after reading Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, you had Teddy Roosevelt break up the meat trust. And when they wrote the regulations to fix these markets, these cartels, they didn't write chicken to the regulation. And that is because there weren't commercial chicken slaughterhouses. You literally just had chickens in your backyard and you butchered them. So what happened in the South was corporations took that exploitive sharecropping model, that thing that really exploited black farmers, and applied it to chicken production. So if you're a chicken farmer in America to this day, you don't own your bird. You're leased a bird. You essentially babysit it. You are told what feed to feed it. You take on a ton of debt to build a big metal shed to the company's specifications. You babysit the bird. You give it back to the company. It's weighed in a room you cannot see. They call it the tournament system. So whoever adds the most weight to the bird gets paid the most. So whoever adds the least gets paid the least. If I don't like you, you're being sassy, I give you the runt, you get paid the least, you go bankrupt. And also because you have so much debt for these facilities, you're in constant, it's such a power thing with the company. And these companies are also very vertically integrated. So like, they make the chicken nugget, all that stuff. The stat's a little old, but like 70% of chicken farmers now in America live in poverty.
Jesus.
And an undercurrent of the book too is like kind of really the failure of USDA to like step in. So here's the thing: when you engage in a sharecropping model of production, you're going to make a cheap product because you're cutting all these corners. Chicken gets a massive amount of market share. USDA could have stepped in and be like, chicken, you got to behave like the other mates. But instead, we see the chickenization thing happen. Like hogs got chickenized, and like so. Driscoll's says my berry baron in my book, and Driscoll's basically applied the chicken model production to berries. So Driscoll sells 1 in 3 berries, but they don't grow a single berry. They contract out the production. So that way people can squeeze labor, hire children, and they can play ignorant.
I think there's something interesting to the lack of regulation around chicken, in the early days, because it represents an older, chickens were part of that older, like garden based notion of like, you part of what was subsidizing everyone's food was something everyone was growing in the backyard, but nobody does that anymore. And yet we still have mostly unregulated chicken meat, chicken production.
Like I think of a farm, like a family farm used to be like retirement portfolio. It was diversified. You had multiple income streams. So if one market cratered, well, at least you had the other ones. Now, it's like if your retirement portfolio was only just one company, that's essentially what each farm has become. Most farms only do 1 or 2 or 3 crops. So they're very, very fragile.
Yeah.
On top of it, I mean, just kind of a side issue to like gardening. My little pet issue is you see this all over Iowa. So many of these subdivisions strip out all the topsoil. So most of these homes don't even have, so it's just clay. So you can't even grow your own food. My parents' subdivision did that. So just here you're in Iowa, the world's best soil, yet you can't grow crap in your backyard.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But we can grow a lot of grass, which is super productive, right?
Throw some Roundup on it, live that, wacky fantasy.
One other question I wanted to throw out here, just kind of setting the stage here for this as well, was, so I think the word farmer is kind of weird now. It's become weird, especially because in Iowa you'll have this. There's a notion everyone has in their head that it's like American Gothic. The farmer is like just this nice little family farmer that grows a couple chickens, couple whatever. But now that term, so I guess, could you clarify what even is a farmer anymore? Because it's a business as well as I'm
so glad you asked, because like that to me is a whole undercurrent of this book too. Is like, what is a farmer? Take my dairy barons. I mean, they cosplay as farmers. I mean, so many people cosplay as farmers. They've been on dirty jobs. Here's the thing: if you claim residency at the Ritz-Carlton in Puerto Rico, are you really a farmer, or is it the undocumented men? You know what I mean? Like, or is it the undocumented men milking your cows, the real farmer here? I mean, that's what's so funny is like, I don't think even in Iowa, I don't think we realize how much of the current immigration stuff in America is rooted in corn.
Yeah.
We produce too much. We tried to burn it in our cars. We also dumped it on foreign markets, including Mexico. You had all these family farmers in Mexico who weren't getting a massive amount of subsidies like our farmers are. With NAFTA, we dump all this corn. We cause a massive migration north where like...
Oh, I didn't know this. Oh my God. So
much of the massive Latino migration in the last few decades is really rooted in a lot of it's NAFTA related, and there's really good scholarship on this out there.
Yeah, I think that's really that's really interesting. I didn't know that. So yeah, you have that, and then we're growing all this food, we're sending it everywhere, and yet America, it is not the cheapest place in the world to get food.
No, I mean that's actually, I'm glad you said that. So like 2 things. Number one, industry, I almost joked I could write a whole book of what industry says in reality. And the biggest thing you hear out of the Bureau is cheap food. That is not factually true when you use USDA's own data. And like, I'm using 2021 data. So here, this is in the weeds. What they will always do is they say percent of income. For percent of income, Americans spend the least amount of food. I'd rather use per capita. Per capita, we actually spend more. To me, our inequality in this country is so high, you cannot use mean, because we live in such a have-not place. Bottom half Americans, what they care about is per capita. And per capita, we spend more money than Canada, than Germany, than England. And I mean, first of all, that makes sense. When concentrated markets gouge, that's what they do. And we deal with it at the store. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, and I think that's especially, I don't know, it's upsetting because, Europe, they're spending less money on food and it's a higher quality food. It's better tasting. I
mean, my big thing with so Cargill's my grain baron. And that big point of that chapter is talk about the Farm Bill. And basically what the Farm Bill does now is it does a ton of subsidies to like grains, but doesn't give anything to like to produce. So now like it takes money to be healthy in America.
Yeah.
You walk in, like you look at pop and you're like, oh, $2 for a 2-liter. But if I want carrot juice, it's like X times more. That's what the system does. I mean, also, like that's like we're all paying through it with health consequences. I mean, the other thing too that bothers me a lot is just I can go to most diners in Iowa. None of that food's from Iowa.
So why don't we move here actually into your specific barons here? So what you brought up Cargill. Like, do we want to start with Cargill here and talk a bit about grain? Because you use this to talk about the structural problem of the Farm Bill. Cargill's
a wild one because of this. Like, there's Cargill and Walmart were not in my original book proposal. It's so funny because like Cargill. I mean, I'm from Cedar Rapids. Cargill's everywhere. I played soccer next to a Cargill plant. I was born next to a Cargill, plant. I went to church, a Catholic church next to a Cargill plant. But it's like, and also they're the largest private company in America. They're bigger than the Koch brothers, but they're not consumer facing. So most people don't know who they are. I mean, they're still in Russia, and it's because like you don't know who they are, so they don't care. Their whole thing is moving and processing as much grain as possible. They also like, and I realized this researching them, they don't do so the Koch brothers, they give a check to politics. the Cargill family, and the family owns 90% of the company. They use middleman. So they'll make a donation to like the American Meat Institute, who then does their bidding. So which actually makes their power much more hidden and actually much more scary. So I use their story to tell the story of the Farm Bill. Because like what's fascinating about Cargill too is they actually started in Iowa. They started up near Dakota. So like my grandma's family's from up there. They're Irish potato people. So Cargill literally was started 12 miles away from where my family homesteaded. And they were founded literally around the same time as USDA. So the whole history of the Farm Bill is really rooted in the Dust Bowl, where you had these markets were oversupplied. Farmers were engaging in environmentally destructive practices, and they were doing that to save their land. So the New Deal comes along. They call it supply management. That's why the Farm Bill does. But it's basically a Goldilocks thing where, sure, you'll give a little subsidy, but you have to take land out of production for conservation. And there was a limit. Cargill hated it. Cargill hated FDR from day one. They thought, he was socialist. It's like classic. Yeah. By the way, turns out FDR was incredibly profitable for their business, which I always find funny. But so like I literally they commissioned their own 3-volume history, 1,600 pages. It was awful because it was so bad. But they kept using this phrase, and I realized it's called endless belt. They've always had a monopoly playbook. They want to have like an endless belt. They want to control grain from when it's harvested to the plate, from movement of it, regions of it. Like I even conclude that chapter saying, like I first thought of Cargill as the closest thing we have to a modern day Standard Oil. They want to own the rails, but really a better example of Cargill is you got to think of them more as a modern day version of the 19th century British Empire. The sun never sets the Cargill grain empire. So they hated that New Deal Farm Bill because they want overproductions of grain. So they essentially finance it, like the destruction of it. And I focus on the 1996 one where the system breaks. Literally after Clinton did what Reagan couldn't do, and that was gut the Farm Bill and make it a corporate welfare. First of all, that's a good Iowa gay sassy line in the book. So I had to say that because there's certain lines that were cut, and that's one I kept in because like I will forever.
Clinton did what Reagan couldn't. That line, that is a good line.
It's a good line. It's like I will like welfare is like my like what Clinton did to welfare is truly one of his worst things. But what the system does now is it's designed to overproduce grains, and what it does is there's like for example crop insurance. There's no cap on it, and it's also not insurance for like rainy day. It's insurance for low prices, where 60% of your premiums paid for by the government. So Bill Gates, one of the largest owner of farmland in America, he can get as much insurance, mostly paid for by you, for low prices for corn. But if he grows carrots, he gets nothing. But if he grows corn, it's a ton.
There's something you said there that I feel like should be paused for just a second so people could fully grasp that. Bill Gates is the largest owner.
One of the largest owners.
Okay.
So here's what's really funny about this, Josiah. It changed. So like we don't really know. This stuff is so murky. It's like 1 year. First of all, it was just randomly discovered he's the largest owner of farmland in America like 3 years ago because they do all these certain tax structures. And then like so it kind of changes based on the year. I think now he's maybe in the top 10, maybe top 20.
Okay.
But I mean, like Ted Turner's technically the largest owner of farmland in America because he has a bunch of ranch land. But but that doesn't that say so much? I mean, the thing that gets me going about Bill Gates is he finances so much of this stuff on regenerative, sustainable agriculture. He doesn't do that on his farmland.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, and I think that this kind of, points to the extractive industry side of things again, quickly is like, this agriculture is something that these rich, rich billionaires invest in. It is something that like, maybe most people aren't thinking much about rural, class dynamics in a rural setting, but like the richest people in the world do.
Oh yeah.
They make a lot of money off it.
You go down. I just remember I was down in southern Iowa like a year or two ago talking to people. So historically, southern Iowa has like the lowest quality soil in Iowa. It was mostly cattle. It's hilly, not good for corn. But you're seeing a lot of like Wall Street money come into it. I mean, we have a no corporation farming law in Iowa, but there's ways to get around it. And people will tell you. You start talking to people, and people down there are like, "Oh yeah, you set up an LLC and you get around it." Like, we know there's. You think Kim Reynolds is enforcing any of this stuff? No. It's a free for all. The highest bidder.
Well, let's move real quick to the Baron that I gathered started this whole book, which was Iowa Select Farms, right?
The OG.
The OG.
So, I mean, what's funny about that one is, I kid you not, this whole thing started in Carl's. And what's
Oh,
that
yeah.
neighborhood called?
Oh, Carl's in Des Moines. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love that bar.
So, yeah, it was literally, I was BSing with a local operative in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
This was that big Fred Hubble Cam Reynolds race. And I didn't know this at the time. State races in Iowa, there's no campaign contribution limits.
Yeah.
So this person was telling me how Jeff and Deb Hansen had given Kim Reynolds worth $300,000 for her campaign. And also, like, he was just talking trash with me of like, oh, they have a home in that gated community by Jordan Creek. They have a home down in Naples, Florida. And they fly back and forth on a private jet, supposedly with the words "when pigs fly" on it. Which, first of all, that's great copy. And to me, that said so much what happened to Iowa is how did a pig farmer become the largest, most powerful, one of the most politically powerful person in Iowa and have his own corporate jet? Mm-hmm. So like that's honestly what started this whole thing for me. Is to me, you have to study how someone amasses power to tackle it. Because what's very clear, you learn very fast, is they got big by cutting corners. They were willing to cross lines other people weren't willing to cross. Because there's this whole notion that, oh, technology, they're savvy. And you're like, no, they're ruthless. I mean, they were giving Kim Reynolds $300,000 because their whole empire is based in Iowa, and they need to control the governor because the second you treat hog manure like human manure, that model is no longer economically viable.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's get specifically into that. So yeah, we see the chickenization of the hog industry here, both in the sharecropping model, as we talked about, but also the hyper concentrated, producing a ton of pollution kind of model of growing cattle. Right. And that's been having massive impacts on the state. Right.
And like, to me, what shocked me researching this was how much the Des Moines elite were complicit in this, or how much they created this model. So this all starts back in the 80s in North Carolina, where a state senator deregulated the hog industry to do the chicken model himself, his own personal profit. And to me, this is also one of the best examples of structural racism in the food system, because what they did in Eastern North Carolina is to build these these hog confinements are even bigger in Iowa. They realized they shouldn't build them that big for disease purposes, but they built them in the poor black areas. And in Iowa, when these manure lagoons by them fill up, they take them and inject them into the soil. But because of the water table level in North Carolina, they spray it into the air.
Oh, wow.
To me, it's just like, and then like you just see all these stories of poor black churches having to repaint their steeples every few years. But it's just like, it's truly horrific. But then the business, so what happens is by doing that, and USA allowing them to do that, they're getting a lot of market share. And so the elite of Iowa and Des Moines in the early 90s commissioned a study by a DC consultant being like, how do we maintain our number one status? It's all about, because you want to be number one in pork and sell as much seeds and chemical as possible. And so literally in this report, it says, we need to stop romanticizing the family farm. We got to let them go. And they allowed this model to take hold in Iowa. And Jeff Hansen, I mean, he was just one of those like right person, right time. I mean, he was a normal traditional family farmer in Iowa. He started building these metal confinements, saw what was happening and goes, oh, and he got into the business and he got access to Wall Street capital and got a lot of market share. I mean, just one of those things where you saw deregulation of industry and he had a first mover advantage.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, and so this is a massive environmental catastrophe for Iowa, essentially, right? Because I mean, because what traditionally, if you were growing cattle in like a pasture or whatever, manure, cow defecating would just kind of mix in with the soil, right? It wouldn't cause the level of pollution that this model does.
Yeah, it's just too much concentrated in manure. I mean, I honestly. And this is not even over top to say this, waterways in Iowa at this point are an open sewer. You have 25 million hogs now in Iowa. These things defecate 3 times more than us. So you're talking about the manure of 75 million people, the populations of Texas, Illinois, and California combined. At the same time, too, that regulatory structure has collapsed. I mean, that Kim Reynolds has hollowed out DNR. Yeah. So you also have these things where, I mean, that's just hogs. We also we're number one in eggs. We have all these other industrial meat and dairy operations. So our environment cannot handle this much manure, and it's destroyed the quality of real life. Because imagine too, like the thing to keep in mind in America is your home's your everything. It's where your wealth is. And what they did, the business elite and these big ag corporations, is they stripped communities in the 90s of local control. So if one of these things get built next to you, you can't stop it. It just destroys your home value, destroys your quality of life. and you go outside and it smells like hog shit. I mean, you know what it is to drive rural Iowa.
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
And you see stories. I mean, keep in mind, too, about 10% of pigs die inside these facilities. So next to every one of them is a big dumpster full of bloated pig bodies. Also, imagine what it does for the workers. Imagine being 30 years ago, your own boss, you're doing your own hogs on land, and then now you're paid a low wage thing to essentially haul dead, bloated pig bodies all day. It's incredibly trauma inducing for these workers.
Oh man, and that Vox article that you wrote about the hog barons here, it includes in like that first paragraph. You made the comment that often the pool will run through a pipe to a manure pond or lagoon, and I'm just the thought of a manure pond is just a horrifying sentence there to really think through.
Josiah, I mean, they tell you if someone falls in, you don't go in after them.
Oh my God.
Because so here's the thing. There's so much of this story is like regulation that should exist that doesn't. We should do water regulations on them. We don't. We should tax them like factories. We don't. We should also do air regulations on these things, and we don't. If you get near some of these manure lagoons, especially if you're in a closed space and the door shuts on you, you're gone. What usually happens is the fumes knock you out, you fall in, and you drown to death. And you see them every few months. There's stories of this happens to a worker, or I mean, I've seen the personal one where like a son went down, and then the dad went in to get his son, and then he went down too. And it's like you literally die through drowning in hog shit. And like,
oh my God.
I mean, this happened in Davenport 2 years ago. There's one in Northern Iowa recently. These happen, and it's almost the scary thing is it's becoming like a fact of life, and so they're getting less and less reporting and less attention.
It's just becoming like one of the things that can happen on the job.
Yeah, I mean, even in my dairy barn, I discovered a worker died, and it was never reported. I mean, my dairy barn has one of the biggest tourist attractions in Indiana, and no one died. You know what I mean? Imagine if someone died of Ventureland and no one knew about it. I mean, when that young child died in that tragic accident in the Raging River, it was
a few years ago.
News.
Yeah,
but like. That's what's so scary.
Well, okay, let's move on to one of the other barons here. I want to make sure we hit all of them. So why don't we do the I think you call them the secret Germans oftentimes, GAB.
Oh, this is my so this was the hardest one to write because it's not linear. Because like, we literally talked about Panera, and then I talk about Nazis, and I talk about my mom's coffee shop. But like I was so determined to make this point. So this is my anti-monopoly chapter, the history of antitrust in America. And the big key point, and the reason why I wanted to make this point is monopolist finance fascist.
Yes. Yeah.
And like that is especially like, I mean, I don't need to be more, what more do I need to say given this moment in the world in America? So my coffee baron they are a secret German family. They originally did chemicals. They hired an American to manage their money in the 80s. He decided to do the private equity model, where you see a competitive market and you buy a bunch of companies and you make a monopoly and then you gouge. They saw a competitive market in coffee. And so they're like, oh, we'll monopolize this space. So they entered America in 2012. They bought something called Pete's. And then they quickly bought a bunch of other brands. So you've never heard of this family. They're secret, but trust me, you probably had one of their coffee in the last month. They own Krispy Kreme, they own Panera, Stumptown, Intelligentsia, Burgers Bagels, Einstein's Bagels, Caribou Coffee, those little Keurig cups. When they bought Keurig, they got Dr. Pepper, they got Snapple. They now sell more coffee than Starbucks in America.
Oh my God.
And part of this is I use that story to also say, this is lost history, but I think is so important, is after World War II, Congress commissioned a study, how did this happen? One of the big findings were that point, monopolist finance fascists. So part of what we did in Reconstruction is we broke up the monopolies. So like Hitler's largest donor was a chemical company called IG Farben. Fantastic book called Hell's Cartel on this. Yeah. And, Hitler would come in the room saying, oh, I don't mean the Jewish shit. I'll just help you sell more products, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? I mean, the company, you know what I mean? They supplied the gas to the chambers. I mean, to me, it's the best example of how the worst example of how this can go off the rails, of how dark this can get. And so this company is broken up. Well, you might have heard of one of their companies today. Like Bayer Monsanto is one of those companies. Yeah. Tell that story. Let's remember that. And then it turns out the secret German family, it was the British tabloids discovered a few years ago. They have a dark Nazi past. The family commissioned a study, a historian, look into what they did. They engaged in slave labor. They were early supporters of Hitler, yada, yada, yada. It's actually much more complicated and really weird when he ended up, the dad had an affair, slept with one of the Jewish workers, slave workers, impregnated her, had kids. Some of those kids now own the company. It's wild.
Whoa.
It's like hard to like, it's like very, but the thing that just, I lost it is right before we, like, and the family says that they atoned for it. They made donations to Jewish charities. We promised never to do this again. Right before we went to Paris, the Wall Street Journal reported that the family still sells coffee in Russia. And that to me said everything. Because like, if Putin is the best example of a modern day fascist. And if you're still selling coffee in there, your word means a goddamn nothing. And so, and I also just like, sorry, I'm ranting, but the last thing is I really want to talk about my mom's coffee shop in Cedar Rapids, because like no coffee comes from Iowa, like, but like people went to my mom's coffee store because she built a relationship with them, and like local businesses care, they care about their communities. And then my mom, we eventually closed it. She went to go work for Starbucks, and these companies just strip people of their meaning. And these local places are what make a place a place. They maintain culture, they maintain identity, and we've like, I just want to make people understand what we've lost. And we live in this era of Excel. I call it Excel thinking, where you think you can manage things by looking at an Excel sheet number. And there's so much more to life than that. It strips us of our humanity. That whole consultant thinking is just bullshit. Yeah. Sorry, that's like that. This is like my this of my book and maybe my favorite chapter. But like, this is because it's Panera. I mean, even I will say Panera is not what it used to be. Like these companies run companies well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this one's I think one that's really that really interested me, partially just because I worked at a coffee shop for 3 years, and I drink a lot of coffee, but also just seeing like these are all brands I recognize, and tying them back to that Nazi history is, I think, that's kind of a reoccurring theme of like a lot of those companies that came out of getting broken up from, like Monsanto is one of the big ones that you had mentioned, right? Like these companies go on to, I mean, Monsanto, would go on to fund other war crimes later on. So, I mean, or produce chemical weapons for that. And
it's really rooted. So I also call like the history of antitrust in America. Like, I'm very much like I'm in the Neil Brandeis camp, they call it, and that is like I do not like concentrations of economic power because that corrupts the political system. Yeah, that is like inherently I want to design like markets are constructs. A market's like a garden. Like if you don't prune and maintain garden, an invasive species takes over. And like keep in mind too, the goal of any corporate executive is monopoly. Like that people like that. It just dawned on me like 2 years ago, and you're like that. Oh, that's so. There's a fundamental tension between business and government. Government wants competitive markets for innovation, for workers, for farmers, and business. Their goal is to capture government because that's where like competitive markets. This is so stupid, but I think of like the interchange near my parents' house growing up. There were 3 gas stations, all local. 2 competed on price. 1 competed on service by pumping your gas for you. It was a little bit more expensive, but it was a nice service. And now 2 of them closed, and Casey's bought the other one. Like was once a competitive market, is now not. And like that to me is like, that's the story of this moment we live in. We're living in a second Gilded Age where there's rampant amount of concentration.
Well, I guess we could move here to Fairlife, your dairy baron here, which I think kind of comes back to, we talked a bit about hogs, and it's a similar situation with this one as well, massive damage to the environment and stuff. But you use this to talk about checkoffs, right?
Yep. So just from an environmental standpoint, so that's about 35,000 cows in operation in Northwest Indiana. It's about an hour south of Gary. Those cows produce as much manure as the city of Austin, Texas in a given day. Jesus. It's also like what's wild to me, Josiah, is driving. I noticed this driving around. There was canals all around their fields. I was like, what's going on here? Turns out that whole area used to be Everglades. It was known as Everglades of the North. Teddy Roosevelt used to go hunting there. So first of all, this land shouldn't even be in like crop production, let alone that many dairy cows standing there. And they were only able to essentially buy 20,000 acres at once because it was supposed to be a third airport for Chicago.
Oh my God.
So all the waterways, all the canals around it are super toxic, besides, smelling awful. And then keep in mind with dairy farmers, most industrial dairy farmers are basically feudal lords because they employ a lot of undocumented men. The PPE loans for my dairy baron, he claimed over like 100 some workers, even though he's been on Mike Rowe's dirty job saying he's a quote farmer. Yeah. I'm sorry, my other favorite gay sassy line, I think Mike Rowe is a POS.
Yep. I agree.
So my favorite line on him is he sold their narrative like he used to sell products on QVC. I think I use the word their sustainable narrative because like what's incredible about my dairy barons is they always love talking about how sustainable they're what they're doing, and it's like Oh, you are actually one of the most unsustainable dairy production models possible.
Yeah.
So like the other thing to keep in mind from like a climate perspective is, so like, yeah, to mention like we were saying earlier about hogs, like when a cow defecates on land, they're fertilizing their feed. When you shove them into these metal sheds, not only do you need fossil fuel to grow their feed, dairy cows, when you pull their manure, it creates methane gas that is not produced when it's decomposing on land.
Right.
So it creates this additional climate gas. So it's actually worse for the climate, this production model. So I use this word checkoffs. Checkoffs, it's the most wonky thing probably in the book, but I was so determined to tell this one because it controls everything. Like
Could you explain checkoffs, because I don't fully understand it still.
Yeah. So it literally, it comes out of the New Deal. It started in Florida with citrus. Farmers literally decided to check a box and basically pay a tax into a pot for growers to advertise they're good. So all orange farmers would check a box, pay a little tax, and advertise drink more Florida orange juice. These things really didn't matter for a long time. They were small, they didn't matter, but they really started taking hold as this Wall Street Farm Bill took hold in the 80s and 90s. As we started overproducing things, how do we get you to buy more of these overproduction things? So like got milk comes out of it.
Okay.
So like, keep in mind, there's also this weird thing too with vertical integration, where like the largest packer in America, Smithfield for hogs, is also the largest owner of hogs. So like the Iowa Pork Association is really the voice of Smithfield, which by the way, Smithfield's owned by China. So the Iowa Pork Association is really the voice of a Chinese multinational, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yep.
But dairy's a different beast. Dairy's a $600 million pot of money now. And it's part of it is because the checkoffs are now run by the co-ops, not the dairy farmer. My dairy baron, he hated it at first because he actually saw what happened. So the family farm really died in Iowa in the 90s in hogs. He saw what happened to them and didn't want to go down like that. So he was determined to create a premium, like his own branded product. So he created Fairlife, which is incredibly long shelf life. It has like a 120-day shelf life. They jacked up the protein content, reduced the calorie, made it lactose free. It's basically twice the price of milk for half the volume. It's what Coca-Cola executive said. So he didn't want to pay a tax into generic milk. So why advertise his competition? Because his competition was generic milk. Why pay into that? So he financed a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court to get out of it. He didn't. By the way, Iowa farmers in the 90s tried to vote to get out of a checkoff. Like, so you could vote to create one, but you can also vote to undo it. They did. George Bush, as Secretary of Agriculture, threw out the vote. Just literally.
Oh my God.
So like.
Super democratic.
Super democratic. Oh, trust me. She also emailed me when this book came out. I think she regrets it. Yeah, she's one of those like Mitt Romney Republicans and now hates Trump.
Yeah,
but whatever.
Right. Yeah, the never Trumper.
So he basically seemingly got into bed with the checkoff. So this big dairy center. So he has a whole tourist, one of the biggest tourist complex in Northwest Indiana. You can come tour his industrial dairy. He has an ice cream parlor. He has a Marriott hotel. He has a rock climbing wall. He used checkoff money to help pay for that. So he took money from family dairy farmers to advertise in the production model, driving them into bankruptcy. He then also used some of that checkoff money to finance Fairlife, so his own premium product, which he then helped sell to Coca-Cola. And then he also, what industry realizes, this whole advertising stuff really didn't work. Like, got milk didn't make you buy more milk. What I argue now is essentially it's used to finance junk science. Science, like, corrupt the space. So, like, Secretary Vilsack, Biden's current Secretary of Agriculture, and the former governor of Iowa, he served as an industrial dairy lobbyist working for a checkoff between administrations, making $1 million a year. It really floods the zone here. It's a revolving door. So these whole manure digester thing, this whole methane gas produced from pooling industrial hog manure creates all this additional methane gas. He saw that problem coming. So he financed all this junk science, essentially create these manure digesters where you try to capture the methane gas that comes off them, takes a ton of tax subsidy, and you're trying to say it's good for the climate, but you're solving a problem of your own creation and a problem that family farmers don't have. So you're using their money. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's so wild. And like, to me, I found this so cartoonish where like the state of Indiana wouldn't even give his tourist attraction a nonprofit tax status because it literally said this is too much for personal gain. Yet, look how much money sloshes around his operation. I mean, Vilsack does tourist events there. It is. And like, what really bothered me is like, he got so much media attention for the longest time over, quote, how sustainable he was. Because it also shows you how broken our media system is now, where like, I don't want to like fault in growth. They're not being paid much. But he sold this narrative. He hired really good PR people and they took it at value.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, part of that just might be like, if you make a bunch of junk science to go behind it, then it's like, if I were in that situation as a journalist, I don't know the science, so I'm like, it must be good, huh?
That's like the biggest thing I deal with. Like, that's actually something I'm talking about at this conference here in Minnesota is like, it's really hard. It's like an average Joe going up against a tenured hog chair at Iowa State, taking all this checkoff money.
Yeah.
Because like there's this whole, I really do think ag economics is one of the most corrupt disciplines in America. There is, as we privatize our land grants, this money filled the void. And your power at a land grant is based on how much money you bring in. You do not get tenure if you are not in the same playbook as Farm Bureau. I've heard so many stories from people. So people go along to get along. And then there's like, especially in ag econ, a lot of Dermot Hayes. I say his name all the time. I think he's so corrupt. He'll literally say whatever the industry wants. So he's all about, like, for example, he's all about speeding up the kill lines at the hog slaughterhouses. This is also one of the most dangerous jobs. And he's like, oh, this is good for, quote, Iowa farmers, according to his study. That guy doesn't disclose to you that he actually does business stuff with my hog barons. He is an expert he takes money from these corporations. Like the I don't know. It's just like the greed is so rampant. And it really, like, you're right. Like, to the journalists, it really warps the public conversation. On top of it, a lot of these academic journals have disclosure policies, but no one's checking in on them. No one's checking to see, because like you go to their own websites, and they will brag about how much corporate money they take, but these academic journals are essentially operating under the notion of self-policing, which is just not happening. No. And it's so bad. Yeah.
Well, let's move here to your berry baron, Driscoll's.
But I just feel sorry for your audience. They're probably getting like really dark in the press right now.
No. Actually, I'm probably usually worse. I'm usually just as ranty. So it's this, yeah.
No, totally fine. It's the weirdest thing with this book thing is like I have to like a lot of people can't handle this much darkness right now in the world.
Yeah.
So I've been having to overemphasize the positive and like what the system could be, just to like inspire people. And like I also like want to package the system we have now is radical. Like everything we're talking about fixing it is very traditional. So like I'm intentional with my image construction, not to come off as edgy. Like I want in the middle as weird as that sounds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense with trying to get your message out there, especially because, you mentioned talking to on Glenn Beck, right? You're trying to just reach anyone, with this message. So yeah, you don't want to come off like this is some crazy socialist notion or anything. Totally makes sense.
I don't know if this is a good joke, but one of my, I'm basically like Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Mayor Pete Packaging.
That is good. No, that is good.
Like, I don't want to be threatening. Like, it's weird because like you realize in the day, Democrat Party is a coalition party. So how do you stitch together a coalition without letting them realize they're being stitched together? How do I not scare the suburbs?
Yeah. Well, I think you've done a good job with that. I mean, better than I would. I'm very much more of a scare of the normies type. Like,
honestly, I learned so much from that failed campaign. I mean, honestly, to me, this book is a political campaign. On top of it, I love door knocking. Because door knocking to me, like, it's ethnography. It's really about just listening to people, and like you just get you read people, you get a sense of things. That to me really shaped me and my rhetoric. It's just like, because when you knock on someone's door, you literally have 10 seconds to sell them.
Yeah, right.
And like even in Iowa, like very few people know what a CAFO is, and you realize, oh, the language here is designed to like hide what we're doing. People don't know. Also, like people's hierarchy of needs. Like most people are just barely getting by. Sure, they want to buy better pork, but like they got bigger fish to fry. How do you make a message that impacts their life directly?
Yeah, absolutely. That's you have to find a way to relate to people with this stuff, which I think you've done a good job of with this. Let's move to your berry baron here, Driscoll's. Driscoll's, as you mentioned, they're applying that like chicken model to berries. So. Do you want to say about them?
Yeah, this one shocks people the most because it's like Driscoll has such a bourgeois brand. And to find out like, oh no, they're just doing sharecropping. I think part of it is like going back to the farm bill. This farm bill, it's crowding out produce. So anything that's labor intensive has moved offshore, kind of like apparel. It's really no different than apparel. Because when things move, when these supply chains get long, transparency collapses. And you see this, like the Los Angeles Times did a really good series 10 years ago on how, the use of children in Mexico produce harvesting is rampant. I talk about berries where a lot of berries now grown in Baja California. I mean, keep in mind this area gets like no rain. It gets only 3 inches a year, which is as much rain as Death Valley. So they drained the aquifers and then they built a desalinization plant. No one really lives there, so they brought indigenous workers. I gotta be careful with words here, but it's almost like a plantation.
Yeah,
the way these
I
things
mean,
work.
yeah, that seems like an accurate description of it.
Yeah, I want to be like on top of it. I mean, it's so unsafe and hard to report in these areas. So when you see stuff, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And Driscoll's, I mean, and the thing to keep in mind is it undermines people doing it right. How can you compete on price against a company using child labor and others? It also undermines farm workers. I mean, you can't, when you're paying someone $12 a day versus $12 an hour, that's you just can't compete.
Yeah.
That's why you've seen so much of California produce now. Most of California agriculture now is nuts because that's just mechanical. And also, I should say, like, when these supply chains move offshore, it makes bad tasting food. I mean, that berry's engineered for durability, not for taste.
Right. Well, yeah, because I mean, it's getting made to grow in an environment where it wouldn't really even be naturally growing in the first place. It's
being made to be like picked and like be at a Walmart 4 weeks later, or what? You know what I mean? Like, it's not being like a berry from down the street.
Well, and I mean, I don't know enough about this to say this confidently, but isn't this the kind of thing that sets up famine in a lot of ways? Because I mean, when you have such a fragile.
No, I'm laughing because you'll find this funny. I went on some rancher's podcasts and he kept telling me about Anna Applebaum's book, Red Harvest, Red Grain.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, like, I mean, it's that same argument where like Ukraine, basically her argument is that Russia basically Soviet Union induced a famine that killed millions of people in Russia. And what it was is these farmers used to be self-sustained. And then Russia basically broke it and made them really dependent on the state, and they were incredibly fragile. And then when it all broke, people fucking starved to death.
Yeah, well, and I mean, if you want, examples outside of the Soviet one, also, I mean, that's Late Victorian Holocausts by Mike Davis. He talks about this happening throughout the colonial, like global South, throughout the late 19th century. It was kind of a lot of it was the same, man-made famine, and it killed millions of people. And
Irish potato.
Yeah, another one.
No, these are weird. It's, I mean, it all goes back to food. I mean, even like a lot of recent migration too has been like, Brazil is such a weird state. And like it has massive industrial agriculture things. And like, so it's coffee, they're overproducing industrial coffee. And so it's like really hurting family coffee farmers in like Central America, which is displacing them and they're causing them to migrate. You know what I mean? Like all of this stuff is like really rooted in like these things. Like when systems get really dependent on one or two commodities, it just makes, like you said, so fragile. I mean, we even saw, I mean, the little thing that scares me the most is actually in healthcare, where like so much of our IV solution is made in Puerto Rico. And so when a hurricane hit Puerto Rico, that supply chain almost broke in like a really scary way.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes sense from the perspective of the individual corporations because they want more money. They want to produce a monopoly. But, for all of us, we all lose in this situation. And then, whoever's living in the region that, relies on, the food that's produced there or whatever, they're losing out too.
One of my favorite things I'll never so I love talking to grocery store people. Like I just love grocery stores. I had one tell me this phrase and I love it. Big boys like to run with big boys. And what he meant by that, the creation of one robber baron creates other robber barons. And that's what Driscoll's is. Driscoll saw the rise of Walmart. It realized one company wants 4 berries year round for 4,000 stores. So that's why Driscoll's grows berries on every continent now, except Antarctica. Because that way can always be shifting supply. Because strawberries are really fickle. They have a short growing window. But that way, sometimes we're growing strawberries in Baja, sometimes they're in Morocco, sometimes they're in Argentina. They just shift it. But
which I'm glad you had like talked about this, because this is something that I know logically it's like, how is it in the US we have berries when they're out of season, like for sale or whatever. But I knew that like that would obviously be the result of mass global industry in some way, but I didn't quite understand how they pulled that off. So that makes, it makes more sense with the kind of Driscoll's model there.
And just like later on, like, how stupid is that from the climate?
Right.
I mean, like, it's like the collapse of regional food production thing is like truly devastating. Even like a simple, this is a random tidbit, but like during the New Deal, the Workers' Progress Administration, they employed writers. And one of the things they did is they wrote these like books on each state, and they're like part travel guides and part Wikipedia. They're really fun. Like I recommend reading the Iowa one. And there's a whole section of agriculture in Iowa. And what you realize is we've lost so much regional food production in Iowa. Like Most people in Iowa know about muscatine melons, but there used to be tons of peaches in southern Iowa. You used to have a lot of grapes in the low hills in western Iowa. You used to have beets, sugar beets in northern Iowa. You used to have a lot of onions around Davenport because that soil is really sandy. And you're like, consolidation. I mean, I just learned the other day, Muscatine used to make a lot of Heinz ketchup. There used to be tons of tomato production over there. But like these things, when they concentrate, you lose this. And I mean, it's also part of like the homogenization of American food and like kind of it's just it's like homogenization, but also the collapse of taste. So like those two things, like the outcomes of that model.
Yeah, food tastes worse. This is why heirloom tomatoes you grow in your backyard are going to taste better than what you get at the store, right?
That is like my big thing in Iowa. Is like, I mean, I lived out east. I lived out east in my life, and like the tomatoes are just awful. You're like, oh, like like a good Iowa tomato in August with like bacon, like a BLT.
Oh yeah,
it's like truly one of the best things out there.
It's incredible. Yeah. I guess talking a little bit about I don't know how to transition this. I was going to move to JBS here, Slaughter Bear, and I was going to point out. I was going to try to find a comparison of like, I don't know, things that make you mad. Here's something you had described as the closest thing to a criminal organization in a modern corporation in America.
You know what's funny about that is like when I read that chapter, I'm not even that mad at them.
Really? Okay.
I'm actually the most mad at Vilsack. Because like I've never seen a more modern day bipartisan pinata than reforming America's meat markets, and like he just blew it. like not even blew it. The fact is, the meat markets have gotten more concentrated the last 4 years. Like first of all, I did enjoy making this joke in Mason City, Iowa, a few weeks ago, but Vilsack is like Harold Hill in The Music Man. He'll tell you what you want to hear, but he means nothing. Yep. His words mean nothing. His whole theory change was, let's throw $1 billion of taxpayer money to finance new entrants into a concentrated market. First of all, there's never been an example of that happening before. And this organization will not give you an ounce of market share. That way you can pretend to do something, but you're not doing anything. And so, you know what's funny is like when you say the criminal thing, I love asking people, and I'm going to ask you in a little bit, like which baron they find to be the most evil, like which one bothers them the most. I thought this one would be the big one. This one isn't, because I think most people just know how broken the meat markets are, because they just see the child labor, the COVID workers, like. And here's the thing about this company. Meatpacking is like what I really know, and I didn't even know this, like, because this happened right before the 2020 election. They pled guilty to bribing over 1,800 Brazilian politicians, including a Manhattan apartment, to become monopolists. So, Josiah, not even that. You let them keep their empire. Like,
what?
Yeah, like how do you bribe your way to monopoly level status and keep doing it? Like that is like that.
How do you not have the company seized or something like that? I mean.
So this was the chapter I was actually the most worried about being sued. So every word here is carefully chosen, because what tends to happen is they get accused of doing something and then they settle. So they like pay a big fine. So here's the other thing to that story. They cut a plea bargain with the government saying for all these bribes. The plea bargain was they recorded the president of Brazil at the time bribing him. This story is even more wild because the president thought his house was haunted, so he was living at the vice president's house. So this whole tape recording occurred at the vice president's. I'm not kidding. So this is going on. Well, the day the news broke, allegedly they engaged in a market manipulation. Like they knew their stock would collapse, so they did that one of those things where you bet against it, whatever. So essentially trying to profit off their plea bargain. It was they settled. The charges were dismissed, but I mean, they've been accused of bribing meat inspectors, using bad meat, using slave labor, because a lot of their beef is done in the Brazilian rainforest, child labor. I mean, it's just like it's almost like every few months you always see in the agriculture news, some meat markets there's allegations of price collusion because turns out concentrated markets gouge people. Shocking.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, and so like this chapter is also like they have 40 brands. Their name is not on any product they sell in America, so you do not know what they're buying. But they're the largest meat packer in America. They're the largest meat packer the world's ever seen. They're number one in beef, number one in chicken, number 2 in pork, number 1 in leather. Which, by the way, fun fact, these SUVs, they take about 12 hides of leather.
Whoa.
It's
That's insane.
It is. I'm telling you, I have like a whole list of facts that I cut from I wanted to make this book very efficient. Like
Yeah.
So like I have a whole other I have like a little like a cut pile where just like going down certain random tangents, and you're like, the amount of leather in an SUV is truly insane.
Yeah, you'll need an unedited version of the book, like a second edition that's got all the fun facts.
Oh, the biggest fights my husband and I would get into over these last 5 years were like, my husband's a vicious editor.
Yeah.
And so we would argue, we would just go at it. Which actually you'll find this funny is I gave a book talk at Prairie Lights in Iowa City a few months ago, a month ago, and my husband's Jewish, and like his culture, like arguing is what they do. And we actually like to argue too, like that's our thing.
Yeah.
And I kept saying that, like, oh, we argued about this, we argued about that. My mom told me afterwards, you can't say the word argue in front of Iowans. Because it sounds like you're actually yelling at each other. That's how, you know what I mean?
Yes. No, I totally understand this. My girlfriend and I bicker all the time. I use the term bicker. That's what I've started using so that people don't
no, that's
think I mean violently yelling at each other.
Yeah, we aggressively bickered, but like,
yes,
he was usually right. It would take me like a day or two to be like, okay, you were right. Like I did this whole tangent about California water, but like Driscoll's, because that was in the Driscoll chapter. And here's the thing: berries are only grown on the coast, so like there's no reason to have all that stuff on the Central Valley water system. So like I get why 5,000 words were cut, but you're like, honey, 5,000 words. Those are weeks of my life.
Yeah, I spent time on that. Well, I guess we could talk about here the last Baron here, the name people will most easily recognize, just Walmart, your grocery Baron.
Yeah, so this one, like I said earlier, I didn't plan to include because I find most critiques of Walmart tend to be classist. But here's the thing: once you start studying grocery, Walmart's in a league of its own. I mean, they sell 1 in 3 groceries in America. Their market share is the same as the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th combined.
Jeez.
They are the king of kings. We have never had a company this big in the history. In the food system this big. The family. Here's the thing too to keep in mind: the family owns Walmart. I mean, they own it's around 50% of the stock. For comparison, Jeff Bezos only owns like 10% of Amazon.
Okay, wow.
The family owns 2 NFL teams: the Broncos and the Chargers. They're the largest, they are either the largest or one of the largest suppliers in America. I think they're the largest. Also, like I said earlier, I love grocery stores. This chapter is twice as long as any other, just because like going back to bickering. So every chapter you have to frame around a story. So like I would essentially do these massive lit reviews on each Baron and then figure out the story to tell. I originally wanted to frame Walmart as the closest thing we've ever had in America to a Soviet Union style Politburo. That's how I want to tell this story. So if you actually read the book, you'll notice there's a subchapter called America's Politburo. But because with Walmart, it's supply and command. Like you're not bargaining with Walmart. Walmart dictates suppliers. Yeah,
it's a direct, like they have such a large hold on the economy, they can't just function as like a command. Yeah. That's insane.
They ship. I mean, my favorite little example of their power is I discovered this in a little Arkansas business publication. Walmart has a rule for vendors to Walmart that no more than 30% of your sales come from Walmart, which I didn't understand. I had to ask people at Hy-Vee. And what they told me is, this is a supply chain risk management strategy. Walmart knows that once you cross that 30% line, you put yourself at the chance of bankruptcy. Because Walmart knows it's such a vulture that for most customers, they sell to Walmart at cost or at a loss. And it actually even publishes a list of like companies over that threshold. So like Walmart wants you on life support, but doesn't want to kill you.
So why sell to Walmart? I guess I don't fully so if they're barely worth it, money wise.
So imagine if you're executive, imagine all of a sudden you lose 30% of your business, your sales, like you're fired. So it's like this weird, it's a catch-20. Like you didn't get that overnight, but once you're into that, you're stuck. Oh,
okay. So it got ingrained first and then, okay, got it.
And also there was this whole regulatory system called the Robinson-Patman Act I talk about a little bit about that added to the Reagan list. Reagan stopped enforcing. It was this whole system, basically safeguards between suppliers and vendors like Walmart to essentially maintain the bargaining power. When that system stopped being enforced, once you start getting that power, once it starts compounding itself, it just takes away. That you can never, once they have so much more power than you, their power keeps compounding itself. Because the thing about it is when Walmart comes to town, you don't buy more milk. You shift production. And the big boys lock their dominance. Like the thing you see a lot in this space is something called most favored nations. So like whatever price you offer to Walmart, you can't offer a lower price to anyone else. And so Walmart now adds a bank, it adds veterinary clinics. Its whole goal is to capture every dollar of America's underclass. Keep in mind, you need so much government because the family doesn't pay a living wage. So much of their employee base requires a massive amount of government subsidies to survive. On top of it, so much of their clientele needs food stamps. It is like this really...
Yeah, the talk I listened to you did at University of Wisconsin was the SNAP stuff here is what I was really interested in. So what was it that, because of so much reliance on Snap basically gives Walmart like $26.8 billion a year, something like that.
I did it. So, oh my God, this stuff used to be,
man.
It's like, first of all, it's basically a low wage subsidy. That's what it is. So like right now you can figure out how much subsidies are going to different companies for whatever. So there's a Supreme Court case by a North Dakota newspaper man wanting to know, okay, how much SNAP money is each grocery store getting? Well, all the Republican justices, including Kagan, which I don't understand Kagan, she joined with where this money, these totals are not disclosed. They're like trade secrets or some BS like that. So we used to know what Walmart would get. Now we don't know how much SNAP dollars they get. What I did is I took the total. I just did a back to the envelope calculation. Here's how much, what did I say? Like how much SNAP dollar there is, spent in a year. And like, I'm not sure if I used like percent of grocery sales to estimate Walmart's intake or if I used, cause sometimes Walmart will say Snap is the true mystery with Walmart. Cause there's also like, it's a big day for Walmart. I mean, I was reading, in a business publication in Arkansas that like, for example, Hot Pockets, their sales 3 or 4x the day people get their SNAP money.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Because I mean, like Hot Pockets, first of all, every culture has a Hot Pocket, it's like a handheld carb with like meat and, vegetables inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in the UP, they call it like a pasty, like miners used to eat them. But think of it, I mean, like for $1, I mean, I'm not sure what they are anymore with inflation, but like it's an economical buy, especially if you're a working person, 2 jobs. It's Walmart.
Yeah, I mean, relied on them in periods of my life also.
Oh yeah, I mean, who hasn't?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't do them anymore because I always burn my tongue on them. I always fuck it up. Sorry, that's like I did the other night with I got pizza rolls, and you just I don't know.
But yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I went down that roll of pizza.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, but yeah, okay. So Snap, because of Snap, like a bunch of that money when the day of the month that Snap drops is when Hot Pocket sales go up. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a big day for Walmart because it just shows you how much the whole underclassness of a Walmart says so much. I mean, like what's even like there's 2 things that really stick out to me from like a bigger societal point. Is one, a lot of the New Deal actually comes out of Southern Democrats. But then the fact that the deconstruction also comes from former Southern Democrats too is really fascinating. You know what I mean? Like the voter base of the New Deal comes out of Arkansas, and then the destruction of it comes out of Northwest Arkansas because like the whole chicken stuff comes out of Arkansas. Literally, that northwest corner of Arkansas, you have Tyson's, Walmart, and JB Hunt, a massive trucking company. That there was a whole deregulation of trucking I didn't even touch.
Oh wow! Okay.
So this whole like neoliberal thing is like kind of rooted in like Northwest Arkansas, which is fascinating place. Like I really encourage people to go vacation there because first of all, the oh my God, what do they call that region from a geographical standpoint?
Is that Appalachia? Is that part of Appalachia?
Not Appalachia, that Arkansas, the southern Missouri. Oh my God, your listeners are probably screaming.
Oh, the Ozarks. There we go.
But it's also booming. And like to me, it's the potential future of America if we don't change course, where it's like such a have not. It's like very Brazil where you go to Bentonville, Arkansas, it looks, it's like Dallas. It's just booming. Like a lot of wealth. It has this like weird mix of like down Main Street Disney mix with the Truman Show, romanticizing what it killed. At the same time, too, it's one of the most unequal metropolitans in America, where you have this whole underclass where like there's more child poverty in Northwest Arkansas than there is in the Arkansas Delta. And so that's kind of where we're moving to. Like, we either live in Walmart America or Target America. Like every brand that was middle of the road, like every JCPenney's, those are the brands that are collapsing. Do you go up market or down market?
Yeah. Wow.
And also, like, what's really to me fascinating too about Walmart is the grandkids are taking over, and they're like our age, and like they're very much like bougie New Yorkers, so they're gentrifying. I don't know.
Walmart.
You know what I mean? I'm not sure that's the right word, but like they're bougifying.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one loves cycling, so he spent over $100 million to make the heart of cycling in America in Bentonville, which is like, first of all, that's nothing. That's peanuts for him. You know what I mean? What's $100? They have Sam Walton's daughter built this fancy art museum called Crystal Bridges. They just did 2 expansions onto it. They're just doing like the Michelin star level restaurants. They're building like a new Silicon Valley headquarters style place for Walmart. They literally bought blocks of like normal American homes and just demolished them all to like build like a college campus type headquarters. It's wild. And like my favorite, sorry, this is like the nerd in me. You go to downtown Bentonville and there's like this like old timey Walmart that's like, you know, romanticizing Sam Walton, yada yada.
Yeah.
That's not the original Walmart. The original Walmart is next door in Rogers, Arkansas, and it's run down and it's like half abandoned, half flea market. Which is like,
oh my God.
That's such a classic Walmart move.
You had to make up your own history. You know?
And it's like, I mean, my favorite little things, these people, I don't want to say their narrative construction. I find Sam Walton's narrative construction really fascinating.
It is.
How do you destroy economic liberalism? Is he did this faux populism. Some people might compare it to a certain state auditor in a certain state, but he would always drive a truck and all that stuff around, but like, and like be all shucksy. But like, for example, when Walmart opened its stores, he purposely structured each store as its own entity, legal entity, because that way, at the time, if you were under so many employees, you didn't have to pay minimum wage. So he was paying half minimum wage.
Yeah, that sounds like Walmart.
He hired, like, you read his memoir and you're like, oh, I kind of like him. But then you realize, oh, this is just the Machiavellianness here of image construction is so fascinating here. Like, I don't know. Like, it's and the thing about Walmart, I don't want to say it, I admire about it is, for example, my coffee brand, they didn't do anything special. They just threw a bunch of money at the coffee industry, bought a bunch of companies. Walmart really didn't buy that much. It just became this machine that just kept getting, it's like a snowball that just hasn't stopped rolling. That is like, I mean, it is, and this thing comes out of Arkansas. I don't know. Walmart's a weird one. I always go into Walmarts. I find them fascinating. To me, if you want to understand America, you got to spend time in like casinos, Walmarts, you know, dead malls, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I actually, I really agree with that. I mean, especially you can see a lot of the class dynamics within a Walmart. I worked at a Walmart for a while, and so yeah, it's an awful working, you know, place to work. And yeah, you can, I think it says a lot about American life. I think if you spend any time working or just spending time in a Walmart. You talked a little bit about the French supermarket model, of coming to the US in that, talk. And so was Walmart like one of the first ones to do that, or was it just like, I don't know. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you asked that. So the Walmart Supercenter is actually a French idea. I mean, Sam Walton just stole it from the French. There was a company called Carrefour. He sold it on vacation, and it was called Hypermarket. That's what they call them in Europe. And so Walmart opened his version. They originally opened his version of it. Sam Walton did. Sorry, they opened 3 of them: like Kansas City, Dallas, and I forget the other city. They're called Hypermarkets USA. They were like 300,000 square feet, like an insane amount, like maybe 350, where literally employees would roller skate in them. They had food courts in them. The Walmarts we know today, the supercenters, are actually the small town version of that concept. And the first one was opened outside St. Louis. And what they realized is it was just, first of all, too much walking for most Americans. Like they were basically malls without walls. And the parking lots were truly disasters. Like it was just too many cars and too much. So Walmart realized, it hit the sweet spot with the Walmart Supercenter. And so what it kind of does, like they call it like what's that term? Like a bike, where you have a center and you have things radiated out. So like you don't see them in Iowa, but Walmart tends to build super centers, and then it builds Walmart neighborhood markets around them. Because it's like you grocery shop way more than you shop for like t-shirts. And so like for Sam Walton, they got into groceries, and you don't really make much money in groceries. Is that way it gets you in the door, so then you buy tennis balls where they make the money. But that way, by having also the Walmart neighborhood centers, you still get that kind of money, and it's like the hub and spoke. That's what it's called, hub and spoke. And I don't know. Now they're like, I mean, this whole. So I didn't do the American Politburo as a framing. Instead, what I did is for this chapter is I framed it around Walmart and Amazon. Have been an epic Godzilla versus Mothra style fight the last 5 years, centered in grocery.
Yeah.
Where Walmart realized its sweet spot is its super centers. So it leveraged its grocery business to go after Amazon. So it's putting a lot of these fulfillment centers on, robotic fulfillment centers on the back of the super centers. You can order online, pick up in store, all that stuff. And then it bought a bunch of tech companies to get the computer scientist stuff to build the website out. And which, I hate to say, Walmart online is actually pretty good and kind of scary good. And Amazon, on the other hand, bought Whole Foods as a grocery play to go after Walmart because they need that last mile. And it's kind of like, I actually argue, I think Walmart's winning. I think Walmart's beating Amazon. But here's the thing, regardless of these two giants fighting, and sometimes it's fun to watch giants fight, it's what they destroy underneath.
Yeah.
Like my big thing is, I think in the next recession, you're going to see a lot of these big box stores go out of business, like your Party Cities, your Staples. I mean, like you're just going to see, because like you're just going to see these two giants consume more and more and more of every dollar you have.
Yeah, until all the money you spend is at these two places.
Yeah. I mean, first it killed downtown, then it killed the mall, now it's going to kill the big box store. And it's, I mean, the fact that they have banks in them, Walmart money centers are basically banks.
Yeah.
They're trying out veterinary clinics. They tried out healthcare clinics in them down south for a little bit. Walmart Pharmacy, I believe, is #1 pharmacy in America. I mean, they truly are one-stop shops.
Yeah. I mean, weren't they like the largest gun supplier at one point?
Don't get me going. That is a good sassy part of the book. Oh my god. So Alice Walton, his daughter, got into healthcare. She's financing a new medical center in Bentonville. And she was talking about how much, I found this interview, she wants to get we got to change people's behavior. We're not smart enough to make the right choices, so she wants to help us. And then the next sentence, and she's talking about all this, and I was like, honey, you're the #1 seller of guns in America. You sell an incredible amount of junk food. Also, I didn't know this. Over 150 people have been shot and killed inside Walmarts in just the last few years.
Oh my God.
In Rapids. The one by my parents' house, someone was shot and killed at 3 years ago. Like the violence in Walmarts are way higher than any other store. So it's like, it just goes to show you the BS of the rich won't save us. Like it's just, if you care about health, fix what you own. Stop telling us what to do, how to improve our lives. Do what the power you have.
Yeah. Well, we've painted a pretty bleak picture here of the state of things. But you've been mentioning trying to like wrap up on some hopeful stuff. So I know you've talked through some of the stuff you think is needed to fix, everything we've kind of laid out here. Do you want to kind of go through some stuff that you think are like tangible steps forward here? Yeah.
So let me just start by saying this. What gives me the most hope here is it's incredibly bipartisan. Everyone's seeing the system's not working. Like I mentioned earlier, the whole going on the Glenn Beck show, I got a great review in the American Conservative. I went on Bloomberg. Like business people see it's not working because airplanes is awful. And it's like a cliche for like someone to go abroad, like a yuppie to go abroad saying, I eat better food, less money, and I lost weight.
It's true though.
It is. It's true. I mean,
I had like 1 week in Paris once and I felt like very good.
No, it's like Josiah. Like I literally told my husband for our honeymoon, we went to Italy, and I was like, I just need to see a food system that worked. And it was just like, I can't. This is so trivial. Writing this book, I got gluten sensitive, but I can eat gluten over there and be fine and like lose weight. It's like that. But
yep.
The other thing, so besides the bipartisanness, is my silver lining is ethanol is going to die, and it's going to die fast. I mean, cars are going to move to hybrids and EVs, and the largest use of corn now is ethanol. So that market will crater, and it'll crater fast. My big hope is putting animals back on the land. Let's phase out this incredibly, because also, by the way, we're playing Russian roulette with diseases and these industrial models. I mean, who knows where this bird flu is going to go? But when you put that many genetically similar animals in a thing, I mean, there's an academic book out there called Porkopolis. So it talked about where in Iowa, a lot of these hog baron, I focus on one hog baron. There's a few others. A lot of them actually own their own slaughterhouses too. And like one would literally check the W-2 of its workers to make sure people weren't cohabitating who worked in the confinement and also worked in the slaughterhouse because the disease stuff is so high.
Oh, wow.
So they would like let people go.
That's insane.
This stuff is truly futile. So ethanol will die. We're going to have to figure out what to do there. That gives me hope. I should also say, even though we just talked about some really rotten people, most people are good. Most people are trying to do the right thing. It's really just a few greedy people holding us back. And I intentionally used robber baron framework to show we've been here before. We dealt with this problem. The fact that we have a berry baron just shows you how cartoonish and ridiculous it's gotten. I'm at the point now too. We should just junk the farm bill. We should stop picking favorites. And at the same time too, use the power of local procurement. Most farmers will tell you privately they don't like doing the farmers market. You get rained out, it's not consistent. You get that contract from like Des Moines Public Schools to give them carrots every week. That's consistent income. You're keeping your money local. It's better tasting. Actually, like I don't think people now will realize like DMAC and Kirkwood have really good culinary programs. Imagine if you could
they do
program and like get a full-time job making cooking from scratch for your local school district instead of doing frozen food for a few hours part-time. You can make that a full wage middle-class occupation. You're saying people are already doing it. Like, it's just how do we help them? How do we grow that? Because also it's good politics. Like, who doesn't want all milk in Iowa served from pasture farmers doing it right? Like, there's a way to. I actually get outflanking Republicans in some of this stuff, and like that's one of the issues I love to say. Like, don't you want more family farmers?
Yeah, right.
That's my favorite little nugget. Is like I when I attack ethanol, I just want more family farmers. I want animals back on the land.
Yeah,
there's something about Democrats just don't usually they don't play in this space. They're insecure, whatever.
I think progressives really don't know how to talk about rural stuff oftentimes, and it's.
And the final thing, just speaking of that, is that we really need to center this on labor because, like, 1 in 10 people work in the food system. Like my mom and dad work in the food system. Like my dad's a trucker, and my mom, ran a bakery for a long time. Once you start talking that, like the labor side, that's a huge chunk of Americans. It's also mostly like non-white Americans, like mostly female, fast food workers. Like, you know what I mean? It's not just about those who grow it. It's also about those who pick it, process it, transport it, cook it, serve it. That's what we need to focus in on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain one of there'd be tons of progress made if we started to see unionization efforts in like slaughterhouses or whatever.
I actually wrote down that slaughterhouses actually can show you what could be, because what we saw as society was a job being exploited a century ago in the jungle. We said we want better. We passed regulations. We elevated that to a middle class job through policy choices. And then what you saw was a systematic assault on that by industry to revert it to its low-wage exploitation. So no job is a middle class. Like, these are choices we make as a society to make these middle-class jobs. So we can go back down that road if we want to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, any other specific pragmatic steps you wanted to throw out there before we kind of wrap up here to fix this?
No, the last thing I'll say is email journalists. I'm a big believer in that. Like, that's actually, if you see someone being quoted, it's who's corrupt or they're missing a side of a story, be nice, be respectful. Just understand journalists are moving a mile a minute, not making much money. But, or if you see something, this is kind of a dark example, but I love it. I love CCI. There was this story in Western Iowa where, so, like I mentioned earlier, 10% of hogs die in these confinements. One confinement owner literally, so that scene in Fargo with the mulcher? He was doing that to his confinement hogs and just throwing them on the field. This woman saw it, was just like you can't do that. It's
horrified.
Horrified. She called DNR didn't do anything. So she went to the TV stations and went to the Constable Office newspaper, got a ton of attention. Things were corrected. Here's the thing. It's because she said something. And first of all, she tried one avenue, it didn't work, but the second avenue got results. And it's like, that's what you got to do. And actually, like, lean into that. Like, I actually find lean into the David versus Goliath thing. You're never going to be dollar for dollar against people. You're never going to beat them equally. You got to lean into like the insurgency of it all. Like, that's actually what I really admire about CC Iowa is they bring people together so you don't feel lonely. So you're like fighting a good fight. You're gonna take a lot of swings. You're not gonna land, but you just need one or two to really land. You just need, especially like that one thing to break through. Because that's the game changer. And so like that's why I like really want to like people like, because robber barons win is when you don't care and the system holds. They win by status quo. But so like by putting into it, by exposing their BS, that's when the empire starts to fall apart. People realize the emperor has no clothes.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. That went by like super fast.
Yeah. I'm like looking at the time. I'm like, holy shit.
I'm getting sleepy.
Anything you want to, I guess, I mean, obviously the book, you want to plug that here. Anything else you want to plug or anything here before I wrap up?
Like I said, yeah, buy the book, but also like join CCI, join organizations, be part of something. Never underestimate the communalness of this stuff, how much you need community so you don't feel alone. That is something I really come to respect these last few years, is you got to have trench mates. You can't fight this fight alone.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps out with the algorithm. And if you're new to the show, check out the back catalog. There are tons of episodes about all sorts of other interesting topics. If you really like the show, consider supporting it on Patreon. It's $3 a month, and you get 2 to 3 bonus episodes a month, as well as, hey, your name read at the end of every episode. So let's do that. The show is brought to you by our lovely patrons, who are, I am once again, Philip Cozy, Gavin Aronson, Joseph Gross, Kyle Gannis, McLonergan, Moss, regular-sized horse, parentheses, small, Robert Heilman, Stephen, a.k.a. Spike Stonehand, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, and, of course, Chris Barker. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the Patreon feed here in a couple days.